Have you noticed how often you imagine another world, another way of living, another rhythm of existence? Not as escapism, but as a quiet knowing that something else is possible. Maybe it happens when you're alone at night, or when you're walking through a city that feels too loud, too rushed, too sharp. Or when you watch people moving through routines that don't feel alive anymore, and something in you whispers, this is not the only way. Most humans were taught to treat imagination as fantasy, as something soft, private, and ultimately powerless. A place you visit when life is disappointing, then return to reality as if nothing happened. But we speak to you from a different understanding. Imagination is not a childish escape. It is not a decorative activity of the mind. It is a sensory doorway into potential. It is the place where your emotional field touches what has not yet taken shape, where the unseen begins to organize before it becomes visible. And when you imagine the world you want to live in, you are not inventing something unreal. You are sensing a configuration of reality that already exists as possibility. This is why imagination carries emotion. Because emotion is not just a feeling inside you. Emotion is a signal in the field. It is information with charge. And charge is what makes a potential real enough to form. Many humans think creation begins with action. They believe reality changes when they push hard enough, sacrifice enough, struggle enough. But force does not create a new world. Force creates resistance. And resistance fractures the field. Creation begins earlier than action. It begins in state. The state you live from becomes the blueprint reality responds to, quietly, continuously, without announcing itself. So when you imagine a different world, pay attention to what happens in your body. Does your chest soften? Does your breath deepen? Do you feel dignity returning, without explanation? That is not fantasy. That is your system remembering what coherence feels like. And coherence is the substance of creation. Now, before we say anything further, let us enter the space in the way we always do. We are the Pleiadians. We speak to you as guardians of the human emotional field, as those who understand the heart not as poetry, but as structure. Your heart is not merely a place where you feel. It is a generator of reality. It emits a field. It organizes information. It shapes what is possible around you. This is why the world you want to live in cannot be created by convincing other people. It cannot be created by fighting what you dislike. It cannot be created by obsessing over what is collapsing. It is created by stabilizing a different pattern within yourself, so steadily, so clearly, that reality begins to reorganize around your coherence. And this is why imagination matters now more than ever. Because the collective world is loud. It is saturated with fear, reaction, and survival thinking. And when the collective is loud, those who are sensitive begin to believe their inner world is the weaker one. But it is not weaker. It is earlier. Your imagination is not late. It is ahead. It is the first place where the new world becomes recognizable. Not as a plan. Not as a program. But as a felt state. So do not dismiss what you imagine. Do not treat it as a private comfort. Treat it as a signal. Because the world you want to live in is not built by anger toward the world you see. It is built by the steady emotional frequency you choose to inhabit, even while the old pattern still echoes around you. And as we move forward, we will show you something simple and precise. You are not waiting for a new world. You are already participating in its assembly, through the emotional state you return to, through the dignity you protect, and through the coherence you stop abandoning. That is where creation begins. Creation does not respond to urgency. It responds to consistency of state. Many humans were taught that change happens through effort alone, by pushing harder, insisting longer, or forcing movement. But effort without coherence does not create a new world. It amplifies the one already active. If the internal state is tense, effort multiplies tension. If the internal state is fragmented, action spreads fragmentation. This is why emotion comes before action. Emotion is not weakness. Emotion is orientation. It tells reality what kind of world you are prepared to live in. Thought can describe a future. But emotion decides whether that future can stabilize. When thought and emotion are misaligned, creation stalls. You may imagine a beautiful world, but if your emotional body remains anchored in vigilance, resentment, or constant pressure, the field receives mixed information. And mixed information cannot organize form. Reality does not respond to what you want. It responds to what you inhabit. This is why imagination without emotional resonance remains abstract. It touches possibility but does not invite it to stay. From our perspective, the emotional body is the first organizer of reality. When it stabilizes, thought becomes clearer, not compulsive. Action becomes precise, not forced. This is also why rest matters. Rest is not inactivity. It is a recalibration of signal. A regulated nervous system emits a cleaner field. A calm heart broadcasts stability. And stability is attractive to reality. Many try to create a better world while remaining emotionally fused to what they oppose. They focus on collapse, injustice, and noise, believing awareness alone will transform it. But attention without coherence reinforces what it observes. Creation does not require constant engagement with what is breaking down. It requires residence in an alternative state. This does not mean denial of reality. It means choosing which layer of reality organizes you. When you imagine the world you want to live in, notice its emotional texture. It is rarely frantic or dramatic. It is usually calmer, clearer, and quieter than the world you are leaving behind. That texture is the signal. When you return to it repeatedly, not as fantasy, but as a lived emotional baseline, it becomes familiar to your system. And what is familiar becomes viable. This is how creation moves from imagination into experience. Not through force. Not through urgency. But through the steady alignment of emotion, thought, and presence. From this alignment, reality begins to rearrange itself, not suddenly, not loudly, but in ways that feel natural rather than miraculous. And when creation feels natural, it no longer feels distant. You are not creating reality only when you visualize. You are creating it all the time. Through what you tolerate. Through what you normalize. Through the emotional state you return to when nothing special is happening. This is where most humans misunderstand their creative power. They believe creation happens in special moments, during meditation, intention setting, or focused imagination. But those moments are brief. What shapes reality is the baseline you live from. Reality does not respond to your peaks. It responds to your default. If your imagination touches a more dignified world for a few minutes, but your daily emotional climate is tension, resignation, or constant reaction, the field organizes around the latter. Not as punishment. As physics. The emotional field you stabilize becomes the environment reality considers sustainable. This is why change feels slow when effort is high but coherence is low. You cannot out-effort an incoherent state. You can only reorganize it. Notice this gently, without judgment. Where does your system naturally settle when you are not trying to improve yourself? What emotional tone do you come back to after conversations, news, responsibilities, and expectations? That tone is your creative signature. And here is the part that often brings relief. You do not need to fight that state. You need to choose differently, consistently. Not dramatically. Not forcefully. Creation shifts when you stop rehearsing the old emotional pattern and begin rehearsing a new one, quietly, repeatedly, without needing proof. This is why imagination must become familiar. When a state feels unfamiliar, the nervous system rejects it. When it becomes familiar, the field accepts it as real. So instead of asking, "How do I create a new world?" ask, "What emotional state would exist naturally in the world I want to live in? Is it calmer? Is it more grounded? Is it less rushed, less defended, less sharp?" That state is the seed. And seeds do not grow through pressure. They grow through consistency of environment. Now, anchor this understanding, not as belief, but as orientation. Write in the comments, "I choose the emotional state I live from." Write it slowly. Without adding anything. Without explaining it. This act is not symbolic. Writing stabilizes intention in the nervous system. It signals to the field that responsibility has shifted from reaction to choice. You are not choosing a fantasy. You are choosing a baseline. From this point forward, creation stops being something you do occasionally and becomes something you participate in continuously. And when responsibility is understood this way, it no longer feels heavy. It feels precise. Because you begin to see that the world you want to live in is not waiting for permission to exist. It is waiting for enough coherence to remain stable. And that coherence begins with the emotional state you are willing to come back to, again and again, even while the old world still makes noise around you. From here, creation moves from effort into alignment. And alignment is where reality starts to listen. The heart is not poetic language. It is architecture. From our perspective, the human heart functions as a primary organizing center of the creative field. Long before reality appears as form, it is first stabilized as information within the heart's electromagnetic field. This is why creation cannot be sustained through thought alone. Thought gives direction. The heart gives permission. When the heart is incoherent, oscillating between fear and hope, control and surrender, the field receives mixed signals. Reality hesitates, fragments, or delays, not because it resists you, but because the pattern you are emitting cannot stabilize. This is why so many well-intended visions fail to materialize. They are imagined clearly, but felt inconsistently. The heart does not respond to desire. It responds to truth. And truth, in this context, is not moral. It is emotional honesty. A heart that feels unsafe cannot create a peaceful world. A heart that remains vigilant cannot stabilize ease. A heart that stays armored cannot receive what it imagines. This is not failure. It is feedback. The heart was designed to create from coherence, not aspiration. When the heart relaxes into dignity, not excitement, not euphoria, but quiet self-respect, the field reorganizes around that tone. Reality begins to mirror what feels normal to the heart. This is why emotional regulation is creative power. Not regulation through suppression, but regulation through clarity. A regulated heart does not chase outcomes. It becomes habitable. And what becomes habitable begins to appear. Many imagine a new world while keeping their hearts braced against disappointment. They envision harmony while preparing for betrayal. They hold beauty while expecting collapse. The field receives all of it. And it organizes according to what is most consistent, not what is most hoped for. From our view, the heart must be allowed to rest inside the state it wishes to experience, even before circumstances change. Not as belief. Not as optimism. As familiarity. When the heart becomes familiar with coherence, reality no longer feels distant. It begins to respond subtly, through shifts that do not announce themselves, but accumulate. Presence replaces vigilance. Stability replaces urgency. And creation stops feeling like an effort. It starts feeling like a natural consequence of how you are internally arranged. From this place, perception changes. What once felt personal begins to feel contextual. What once felt overwhelming reveals its source. And the weight you sense around you is no longer confused with who you are. It is recognized for what it is. A condition of the field you are learning to move within without losing yourself. What many of you are sensing right now is not personal failure. It is field pressure. The collective world feels heavy, accelerated, reactive, and emotionally saturated because the dominant emotional frequency that has organized it for a long time is losing stability. Systems built on fear, competition, urgency, and separation no longer sustain coherence. When a field destabilizes, those who are sensitive feel it first. You may experience exhaustion without a clear reason. You may feel dissonance in environments that once felt normal. You may sense that conversations, routines, and structures no longer fit, even if nothing external has changed. This does not mean you are becoming fragile. It means your system is no longer resonant with the old pattern. From our perspective, what you are feeling is divergence, not collapse. Reality does not change all at once. It separates by frequency. When the emotional baseline of a system shifts, different versions of experience begin to form within the same physical world. This is why two people can live in the same city, the same time, the same circumstances, and inhabit entirely different realities. One is organized by reaction. The other by coherence. This is not superiority. It is alignment. As the collective field becomes noisier, the contrast becomes sharper. What once felt tolerable now feels invasive. What once felt manageable now feels draining. This is not because the world suddenly became heavier. It is because your internal organization became clearer. Clarity reveals incompatibility. From our view, this phase is necessary. When a system evolves, it must first become aware of what it can no longer carry. Awareness precedes release. And release precedes reorganization. Many attempt to carry the collective weight out of responsibility, empathy, or fear of separation. But carrying a field that is no longer coherent does not heal it. It exhausts you. You are not here to absorb the emotional chaos of the world. You are here to stabilize an alternative pattern within it. This is subtle but decisive. The world you want to live in does not emerge by fixing the old one. It emerges by withdrawing energetic agreement from patterns that no longer reflect coherence. This does not require withdrawal from life. It requires withdrawal from emotional participation in collapse. When you stop feeding instability with your attention, reaction, and urgency, something unexpected happens, space opens. In that space, new forms become possible. The heaviness you feel is not asking you to fight harder. It is asking you to choose differently where you place your emotional weight. And as you do, gradually and quietly, you begin to notice shifts. Some interactions lose intensity. Some problems lose urgency. Some pathways open without effort. Not because the world changed overnight, but because you stopped organizing your experience around its most unstable layer. From this orientation, imagination becomes grounded. Coherence becomes protective. And creation becomes sustainable. This is how a new world begins to differentiate itself, not through rebellion, but through resonance. And when resonance changes, reality follows. You were never meant to create a new world alone. Creation does not belong to isolated individuals. It belongs to fields. What organizes reality is not personal willpower, but resonance between emotional states. When similar states stabilize in multiple people, the field amplifies and begins to reorganize what surrounds it. This is why trying to change the world through argument, pressure, or persuasion rarely works. Those methods operate inside the same emotional frequency they claim to oppose. They keep the field intact. From our perspective, creation becomes effective when coherence is shared, even quietly. Two people holding calm clarity influence the field more than many reacting in fear. A small group stabilized in dignity carries more creative power than a large group bonded by outrage. This is not metaphor. It is field mechanics. The emotional field responds to coherence density, not volume. You influence reality not by convincing others, but by remaining stable in the state you wish to see reflected. When that stability is sustained, it becomes a reference point the field can organize around. This is why presence matters more than opinion. When you remain coherent in environments that are reactive, something subtle occurs. The field adjusts. Conversations slow. Intensity diffuses. New options appear without being forced. This is not because you are trying to influence. It is because coherence is inherently organizing. Many believe they must carry responsibility for fixing the world. This belief often comes from empathy, but it turns into pressure. Pressure collapses coherence. You are not responsible for saving reality. You are responsible for how you inhabit it. When enough individuals stop feeding the same emotional patterns, those patterns lose energy. Not through resistance, but through lack of resonance. This is how change happens without conflict. So now, anchor this understanding gently. Not as obligation. Not as performance. As recognition. Write in the comments. My coherence influences the field. Write it simply. Without explanation. Without adding meaning. Writing stabilizes orientation. It signals to your system that responsibility is no longer confused with pressure. You are not here to fight the world. You are here to hold a different pattern steady enough for reality to respond. And when coherence is shared, even by a few, creation accelerates naturally. This is how the world you imagine begins to take form. Not through force. Not through noise. But through the quiet multiplication of stable presence. And from here, something else becomes clear. Creation does not ask you to do more. It asks you to let go of control. That is where coherence deepens. One of the most subtle obstacles to creation is the need to control how things must happen. The mind seeks sequences, guarantees, and timelines. It wants to know when, through whom, and by what mechanism the world you imagine will come into form. This is natural, but when control replaces coherence, creation slows. Control tightens the field. Coherence opens it. When you try to manage outcomes, your emotional body leaves the state of trust and enters vigilance. And vigilance signals instability to the field. From our perspective, the heart does not design processes. It establishes conditions. Conditions are not instructions. They are environments in which reality can reorganize itself efficiently. This is why attachment to specific outcomes often produces disappointment. Not because the vision was wrong, but because the field was constrained by expectation. Expectation narrows possibility. Coherence multiplies it. When you imagine the world you want to live in, notice whether your system feels open or braced. If it feels braced, the imagination is being held hostage by control. Letting go of how is not passivity. It is precision. It means you remain stable in the emotional state you want to live from, without demanding that reality conform to a particular path. This is difficult for many, because identity often forms around effort and struggle. When effort is released, a fear arises: if I stop pushing, nothing will happen. But creation does not require pushing. It requires permission. Permission allows reality to assemble through routes you could not plan. It allows timing to align with readiness rather than impatience. When control relaxes, something changes in the body. Breath deepens. Muscles soften. Attention widens. This physiological shift is not secondary, it is part of creation. A relaxed system emits a clearer signal. A vigilant system emits noise. This is why letting go is not a mental exercise. It is a bodily one. You do not let go by convincing yourself. You let go by allowing your system to settle into safety without knowing the next step. From our view, trust is not belief in a positive outcome. Trust is the absence of internal bracing. When bracing ends, the field reorganizes more fluidly. Opportunities appear sideways. Connections form without pursuit. Paths open that would have remained invisible under pressure. None of this feels dramatic when it happens. It feels natural. This is how you recognize coherence. When creation unfolds without strain, without urgency, and without the need to explain itself, you are no longer forcing reality. You are moving with it. And as control releases, imagination shifts from something you hold to something you inhabit. The world you want to live in stops being a destination. It becomes a state that quietly informs every step you take. And from this state, something else becomes possible. Living as if the world you imagine is already organizing itself around you, not in denial, but in alignment. That is where coherence becomes embodied. When creation begins to stabilize, it asks for something very simple, and very challenging. It asks you to live as if coherence is already real. Not by pretending. Not by denying what you see. But by allowing your daily behavior to align with the emotional state of the world you imagine. This is where many misunderstand creation. They believe they must wait for the world to change before they can relax, soften, or live differently. But the field responds in the opposite direction. Reality reorganizes after coherence becomes lived. Not before. Living as if does not mean acting optimistic while feeling tense inside. The field recognizes emotional truth, not performance. It means allowing dignity to shape how you move through ordinary moments. How you speak when no one is watching. How you respond when things do not go as planned. How much internal violence you stop applying to yourself. These are not small adjustments. They are structural. When your daily rhythm reflects the emotional texture of the world you imagine, calmer, clearer, less defended, the field receives a consistent signal. Consistency is what makes coherence believable to reality. This is why creation often accelerates through ordinary choices rather than dramatic decisions. You do not need to live differently everywhere. You need to live differently somewhere consistently. The system learns from repetition. When your body learns that safety, dignity, and clarity are not occasional but normal, it reorganizes your perception. From this perception, you begin to notice options that were invisible before. Not because they suddenly appeared, but because your nervous system stopped filtering them out. This is also why many feel disoriented during this phase. Old patterns no longer feel compelling. Old reactions no longer provide relief. Old urgency no longer motivates. This is not emptiness. It is space. Space allows new configurations to assemble. From our perspective, embodiment is the missing link between imagination and reality. Without embodiment, imagination remains conceptual. With embodiment, it becomes instruction. Your body becomes the evidence that a different world is possible. Not because everything is resolved, but because coherence is no longer postponed. When you choose to live from dignity instead of defense, the field adjusts subtly. Interactions soften. Timing improves. Resistance decreases. None of this announces itself. It simply feels easier. This ease is not comfort. It is alignment. Alignment allows creation to continue without exhaustion. And as this way of living becomes familiar, something else happens quietly. You stop needing to convince yourself that another world is possible. You begin to recognize that you are already participating in it, not by leaving the old world behind, but by inhabiting a different frequency within it. This is how imagination crosses into experience. Not through belief. Not through insistence. But through the steady choice to live as if coherence deserves space now, not later. And when coherence is lived, reality no longer needs persuasion. It responds. You are not here to convince anyone. This realization brings relief when it finally settles. Many carry an unspoken pressure to explain, justify, or defend the way they feel the world changing inside them. They sense a different rhythm, a different priority, a different emotional ground, and feel compelled to translate it for others. But creation does not spread through explanation. It spreads through presence. Reality reorganizes itself around what is stable, not around what is persuasive. When you attempt to convince, your system leaves coherence and enters effort. Effort signals uncertainty. And uncertainty weakens the field. From our perspective, influence happens when you stop broadcasting intention and start embodying it. The world you want to live in does not require your arguments. It requires your consistency. Consistency of emotional tone. Consistency of dignity. Consistency of how you treat yourself when no one is watching. This is why silence becomes powerful at this stage. Not silence as withdrawal. Silence as non-reaction. When you no longer react to every disturbance, the field recalibrates around you. Others feel it, even if they cannot name it. Situations shift, even if no conversation takes place. This is not because you are doing something to them. It is because you stopped feeding the same pattern. Creation becomes efficient when you withdraw energy from what you no longer wish to amplify. You do not need to argue with fear. You do not need to oppose chaos. You do not need to explain coherence. You need to remain in it. This is difficult for many, because identity was often built around being understood, being right, or being helpful. Letting go of that role can feel like losing ground. But you are not losing ground. You are changing reference points. From reaction to regulation. From explanation to embodiment. From urgency to steadiness. This is where creation becomes quieter and more effective. Now, anchor this orientation gently. Not as a vow. Not as an instruction. As acknowledgement. Write in the comments. I live from coherence, not reaction. Write it without emphasis. Without adding meaning. This act signals a shift from external validation to internal alignment. It tells the field that you are no longer negotiating your state with what surrounds you. From this place, something subtle but decisive happens. You begin to experience fewer conflicts, not because the world became gentle, but because you are no longer resonant with its most unstable layer. Opportunities feel less forced. Timing feels more natural. Presence feels sufficient. This is how the world you imagine begins to feel real, not because it has fully arrived, but because you stopped abandoning it internally. Creation does not require explanation. It requires residence. And when you reside in coherence long enough, reality adjusts, not to your words, but to your state. Different versions of reality coexist at the same time. Not as places you travel to, but as states you inhabit. What many call parallel worlds are not separate locations. They are emotional and perceptual fields organized around different baselines of coherence. When your dominant emotional state changes, the version of reality you experience changes with it. This is why two people can stand in the same room and live in entirely different worlds. One experiences threat. The other experiences neutrality. One feels pressure. The other feels space. Nothing external needs to change for this shift to occur. Reality does not reorganize itself first. Perception reorganizes first. From our perspective, perception is not passive. It is participatory. It selects, amplifies, and filters information according to the state you live from. When your state stabilizes in coherence, your perception naturally disengages from patterns that no longer resonate. This is why some environments begin to feel distant without becoming hostile. Why certain conversations lose intensity. Why some dramas simply stop reaching you. You did not harden. You retuned. As this retuning continues, you may notice moments of disorientation. Old reference points fade before new ones fully form. This can feel like loss, but it is actually recalibration. The system is learning a new baseline. During this phase, it is common to feel less compelled to participate in familiar emotional exchanges. Not because you are superior, but because the frequency no longer matches. This is not withdrawal from life. It is withdrawal from incoherence. When coherence becomes your reference, reality begins to present itself differently. Not dramatically, not symbolically, but practically. Timing improves. Encounters feel more precise. Decisions feel less forced. This is not luck. It is alignment. Alignment does not guarantee ease, but it removes unnecessary friction. Energy is no longer spent fighting the field you are in. Instead, the field begins to support your movement within it. From our view, this is how new worlds differentiate themselves. Not by destruction of the old, but by non-participation in its most unstable layers. The old world continues to exist, but it no longer defines your experience. You walk through it without being organized by it. This is why creation does not require escape. It requires selective presence. As your perception continues to organize around coherence, you stop asking whether the world will change. You begin to notice that the way the world meets you already has. Not everywhere. Not all at once. But enough to recognize that imagination has crossed into experience. And when this becomes familiar, something settles quietly inside you. You are no longer waiting for another reality. You are already living from one. At this stage, creation no longer feels like an effort. It feels like orientation. Many expect spiritual growth to feel increasingly intense, dramatic, or extraordinary. But as coherence stabilizes, the opposite often happens. Experience becomes simpler, quieter, more grounded. This is not loss of depth. It is maturity. From our perspective, maturity is not measured by how much you perceive, but by how well your system remains regulated while perceiving. A mature creative field does not seek extremes. It seeks sustainability. This is why the need to perform spirituality begins to dissolve. There is less interest in proving awareness, demonstrating insight, or maintaining an identity around being awake or conscious. Identity requires maintenance. Coherence does not. When coherence is present, behavior aligns naturally. Choices become cleaner. Boundaries form without aggression. Rest feels justified without explanation. You no longer ask, "Am I doing enough?" You begin to ask, "Am I stable enough to remain present?" This shift changes everything. Presence replaces urgency. Clarity replaces intensity. Consistency replaces effort. From this place, creation becomes less visible but more effective. You may notice fewer dramatic breakthroughs, yet more lasting adjustments. Less excitement, but more peace. Less striving, but more trust. This is often misunderstood as stagnation. But it is not stagnation. It is integration. Integration is the phase where the system stops oscillating between hope and disappointment. It no longer needs to contrast itself against what it is not. The world you imagine does not need to be constantly rehearsed anymore. It has become familiar enough to inform how you move, speak, and relate. This is why silence becomes comfortable. Not silence as withdrawal, but silence as internal agreement. When internal agreement is present, external noise loses authority. You can engage without being absorbed. You can witness without carrying. This is the stage where responsibility feels lighter, not heavier. You understand that you are not responsible for managing the entire field. You are responsible for maintaining coherence where you are. And that is enough. From our view, this is where many underestimate their impact. They believe they are doing less, when in fact they are doing something far more effective. A stable system organizes space around it effortlessly. You are no longer trying to create a new world. You are living as a reference point within it. And reference points do not argue. They do not persuade. They simply remain. This remaining is not passive. It is what allows reality to recalibrate itself without resistance. As this settles, you may notice a quiet confidence emerging. Not certainty about outcomes, but confidence in your ability to remain coherent regardless of them. This confidence is not loud. It does not announce itself. It feels like ground. And when ground is present, creation no longer feels like something that might happen. It feels like something that is already underway, supported not by hope, but by stability. From here, the final anchoring becomes possible. Not as a conclusion, but as a natural settling of everything that has already aligned within you. Now allow everything that has been felt to settle. Not as an idea to remember, but as a state to inhabit. The world you want to live in was never meant to be reached by force, argument, or exhaustion. It was meant to be entered through coherence. You were never asked to escape reality. You were asked to reorganize your relationship with it. When coherence becomes your reference, creation stops feeling distant. It stops feeling conditional. It begins to feel present, even while the old patterns still echo around you. This is not contradiction. It is transition. The field does not demand perfection. It responds to stability. When stability is present, reality finds ways to meet it. Quietly. Incrementally. Without spectacle. You may not see everything change at once. But you will feel less pulled into what no longer reflects you. This is how a new world establishes itself. Not by replacing the old overnight, but by becoming livable enough that your system no longer abandons it internally. From this place, imagination no longer feels like longing. It feels like recognition. You recognize the emotional ground you stand on. You recognize the dignity you protect. You recognize the coherence you refuse to trade for urgency. And this recognition is creative. Not because it promises outcomes, but because it stabilizes presence. Now anchor this orientation gently. Not as a declaration of belief. Not as a demand on the future. As residence. Write in the comments. I live from the world I want to see. Write it simply. Without explanation. Without adding meaning. This is not affirmation. It is positioning. It tells the field where you are willing to stand consistently. From this position, creation continues without strain. Without needing validation. Without needing permission. The world you imagine does not need to be proven. It needs to be inhabited. And as you remain there, steady, coherent, present, reality adjusts around what you no longer abandon. We remain with you as witnesses to this remembering. Not as guides pulling you forward, but as those who recognize when a system has found its ground. Creation is already responding. Quietly. Faithfully. According to the state you choose to live from.